Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Thursday morning weekly Parsha Shir. Special kudos to those of you who have joined us to learn just a couple of days before Pesach. If you're watching this while you're cooking borscht or while you're cooking applesauce, please enjoy the background entertainment while you cook for Pesach. If you've ever been to Mount Miron, Har Miron, in the north of Eretz Yisrael, where Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is laid to rest, where hundreds of thousands of Jews go every year on Lag BaOmer, the day of the passing of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. You may have noticed that next to Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is buried his son, the one the Gemara refers to as Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon. Reb Elazar, the son of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. They were a very famous chavrusa. They studied together for 13 years in the cave, as the Gemara tells over very famously. We learn this Gemara every year around Lag BaOmer time. But be it as it may, they're buried there right next to each other, actually in the same cave. And the fact that they're buried next to each other in the same cave is a story in and of itself, of course. The Gemara tells the story in Masechta Bava Metzia in a Perek of Gemara called Asoicher Es HaPoyalim. One who hires workers is the name of the chapter. And there the Talmud relates that after the passing of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, was the great Tana Eliki, the godly Tana, the teacher of Torah, the one who had hands down respect and admiration and was considered at the highest level by all his fellow Chachamim, all the sages of the Mishnah, lived not long after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. After he passed, his son, Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon, became a bit of a controversial character. He was, the Chachamim called him into question. They had actually a nickname for him. They called him Chometz ben Yayin, vinegar the son of wine. Primarily, they were very unhappy with him assisting the Roman government in catching Jewish thieves. These Jewish thieves were then, after they were caught, they were then sent off to Rome, where in many circumstances, Rahman al-Islam, they were executed. And Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon was seemed to have gotten caught up in the web of the Russian government, in the web of the Roman government, in catching these Jews and sending them back to Rome. And so the Chachamim were very unhappy with him. They referred to him as Chometz ben Yayin. And despite the fact that Reb Elazar over and over again proved his innocence, nevertheless he remained, if you will, this controversial or this out-of-the-box kind of character. So much so, the Gemara has many details of the story which I don't want to get into, but just one part that I want to say. So much so that after Reb Elazar passed, the Chachamim, the sages of the time, refused to bury him. They refused to allow him to come Lekvuras Yisrael. Now, Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon, Reb Elazar, the son of Reb Shimon, the Gemara says, anticipated this. He anticipated that after he would pass, the rabbis would not allow him to be buried. So he told his wife before he passed that after he passes, she should take him upstairs to the attic of his own house, and she should leave him there until the time would come when the Chachamim, the sages, would finally agree to lay him to eternal rest. Until that point, he should be left upstairs in the attic, and he reassured his wife that miraculously his body would not decompose at all. This is what the Gemara says. Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon passed, and his wife followed his instructions. She took him upstairs to the attic, where his body remained, the Gemara says, for between 16 to 24 years. Somewhere between 16 and 24 years, his body lay up in the attic. The rabbis were so upset. They were so bothered by Reb Elazar bar Reb Shimon's decisions and what he had done, his involvement with the Roman government. Again, bearing in mind, the Romans were the ones who had destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash, and he was helping them. For 16 to 24 years, they refused to allow him to be buried. His body remained 100% intact in the attic of his own home for 2 decades, approximately. Until one day something happened, and actually Erev Yom Kippur, the Chachamim all decided, we've had enough, this has got to end, and they took him, and one fine day, and Erev Yom Kippur, they buried him. Now, there's actually two versions in the Gemara of what exactly it was, what exactly happened that triggered the Chachamim's change of heart that one day they decided we're going to lay him to rest? What was it? According to one version of the Gemara, it was that Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon's wife, again, the wife who had been watching over and preserving his body for 2 decades after he passed, his wife got into a dispute with one of her neighbors. And her neighbor cursed her. And the neighbor said, may you end up just like your husband who's been lying there for, 2 decades and then some, and never be buried. And the Chachamim heard about this, that the neighbors were now cursing his wife, that she should end up just like her husband. And the rabbis went, whoa, we've taken this too far. Another fascinating version of the Gemara as to what happened that triggered the Chachamim's willingness decision to bury him is that one night they had a dream. All of the rabbis had the same dream on the same night. And they all dreamt that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the father of Rabbi Elazar, came to them in a dream and said, Preido achas yeshli, I have one child, and he's passed away, and he's lying in the attic of his home for 2 decades, and everybody refuses to bury him. Why would you do that to me? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said in a dream to all the rabbis, many, many years after he himself had passed away. And so when the rabbis woke up and discovered that they all had the same dream, they all got together, and they went and they took him, and they laid him to rest on Har Miron in the same cave as Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. I only want to add parenthetically before I move on with what I want to focus on for today's Devar Torah, as it's relevant to Parshas Metzia. I only want to add parenthetically that the Gemara relates something fascinating. The Gemara relates that for the 2 decades that Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon's body lay in the attic of his own home, no misfortune befell that town where he was lying. His hometown, no misfortune. There were no pandemics. There were no attacks by wild animals. Not only that, the Gemara says, but actually in perhaps one of the greatest miracles in all of Jewish history, there was no machlokas in the town where he lived. Not where he lived, where he had already passed, where his body was lying. There was never any disputes between Jews. There was never any machlokas between Jews. Why? Because if 2 Jews ever got into any kind of dispute, they would go and they would stand in front of the home where Reb Shimon's body was lying. And in the presence of the home, they would direct their voices toward the attic where his body was, and each one would state his claim. Right? So if it would be Reuven and Shimon, Reuven would say, Rebbe, Shimon stole $100 from me. And Shimon would go, Rebbe, Reuven stole $100 from me. And they would each, they would each give their version of the story. And when they were done, the Gemara says, a voice would come down from the attic where his body was lying. And it would say, Ish ploini ata zakai, Ish ploini ata chayev. Declare which person was correct and which person was incorrect, which one was right, which one was wrong. And they both accepted the ruling. This is what the Gemara says. You can look it up if you'd like. Pesach of Bava Metzia daf Pedal Romid Beis. All right. So much so that the rabbis anticipated that when it did come the time to bury Rabbi Elazar, the rabbis anticipated that the people of the town wouldn't let them take his body. So they waited. They went ahead and they did it in Erev Yom Kippur because they knew Erev Yom Kippur everybody's busy. They would be distracted, and they took him Erev Yom Kippur, and they ascended Har Miron to the same cave where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried, and they readied themselves to bury Rabbi Elazar right next to his father. Here's the part that I want to focus on for today. Says the Gemara, as they brought Rabbi Elazar to the cave of his father, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, where he is buried, where they both buried till this day on Har Miron, when they got there, they found a serpent encircling the cave. The serpent was not allowing them access. Amrullah, the rabbis who are now carrying the coffin of Rabbi Elazar, who's been dead for 2 decades approximately, they turn to the snake and they say to it, Achno, Achno, serpent, serpent, psach picha, open your mouth. V'yikonas ben eitzel aviv, allow a son to be reunited with his father. Posach lehu, concludes the Gemara. The serpent opened its mouth, gave the rabbis access to the cave where Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is buried. And there they entered and they put down the coffin of Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon after him waiting for this for 16 to 24 years. Okay, this is my introduction. And if you have a Chumash in front of you, open up to this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is Parshas Metzia, Perek Yud Daled, Possuk Lamed Gimel. Of course, we know the Parshas of Tazria and Metzia are filled with discussions about Tzaraas. You all know this. Tzaraas, the Torah explains to us, exists in three levels, or in three forms. There's Negoi Odom, which means the Negoim, the illness, this affliction of Tzaraas, as it appears on the flesh and the skin of a person. There's Negoi Begodim, there's this affliction, this ailment of Tzaraas, as it appears on the garments. And then there is what's called Negoi Batim, where the Torah talks about this Tzaraas, it's mistranslated as leprosy. It's not leprosy. This ailment, this whatever it was, type of disease, would appear actually on the homes of the Jews. So bear with me, we're going to read a couple of Pesukim together, because it's important, and here it goes. Perek Yud Daled, Possuk Lamed Gimel, the beginning of the 6th Aliyah that we'll read this Shabbos, Mirz Hashem, Shabbos HaGodel, Parshas Metzia. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe v'al Aaron Leimer, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron. And he told them, Ki savoyu el Eretz Canaan, when you come to the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, Asher ani noisen lochem la'achuza, that I, Hashem, am going to give you, the Jewish people, for a possession, as an inheritance. V'nosati nega Tzaraas, Hashem says, I will place the plague of Tzaraas beveis eretz achuzaschem, in the homes of the land of your inheritance. Tzaraas, Hashem says, will appear on the homes. Ubo asher lo yabayis, the owner of the home shall come. V'higid lakoyen, and tell the kohen, Leimer, saying, Kenega nir li baboyis, something like a nega, something like this illness, something like this epidemic is appeared to me in my home. V'tzivu hakohen upinu es habayis, the kohen will give the instruction, the home will be cleared before the kohen goes in to see the nega, before the kohen goes in to see the Tzaraas, so that if the kohen declares it to be impure, nothing in the house shall become impure, because everything will be removed, and he'll come and he'll see it. And if he sees that it is in fact Tzaraas, he orders the home to be completely sealed off. He orders the home to be inaccessible for 7 days. He comes back on the 7th day, and if the Tzaraas has not healed, then they would remove that part of the home where the Tzaraas had appeared and close it for another 7 days. And if that didn't help, eventually the entire house would be knocked down and destroyed completely. Okay. So this again is the Torah's way of articulating to us the specifics of Negoi Batim, of what happens in the event that Tzaraas appears on the actual homes, the walls of the home. All right, Rashi says very famously, Rashi brings that the Tzaraas would appear first on the homes as a warning sign, and then on the person's garments. If he didn't heed the first warning, it would appear in the garments, and then if you didn't even heed that warning, eventually it would appear on one's skin, on one's flesh as well, but it would always start off on the home. That part, I don't want to get into that part now. Again, just what's relevant to know for today is just that in general, there are 3 types of negoim, three types of Tzaraas, on the skin, on the flesh, on the clothes, and on the garment. And when it comes to on the skin, on the garments, and on the home, when it comes to the nega, the Tzaraas that appears on the home, the Torah says the owner of the home goes to the kohen. He tells the kohen, it seems like there's Tzaraas on my walls. The kohen will order the house emptied completely. He'll go and check it out. If in fact it is Tzaraas, he will quarantine. Remember that word? He'll quarantine the home, wait 7 days. If the Tzaraas is still there, they'll remove that part of the home where the Tzaraas is. And if the Tzaraas reappears somewhere else, the entire home would be knocked down. Okay. Says the Gemara, Masechta Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Aleph, Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, a teaching in the name of Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Again, now we got to, as they say in Yiddish, we got to hold on to our heads here. A teaching in the name of Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon. Now remember, who is Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon? This is the son of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar, who was with Rab Shimon Bar Yochai for 13 years in the cave. But after the passing of his father, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai became controversial. The rabbis were not happy with his association with the Roman government. They called him Vinegar, the son of wine, and refused to bury him after his passing for 20 years. Until eventually they did, after the serpent allowed them to. Says Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon, says the Gemara, Bayis Hamenuga, this case of a home, this mitzvah of a home with Tzaraas, Lo hoya v'lo osid liyos, never happened and never will happen. In Yiddish we say, Nish gestoigen, nish gefloigen. How's your Yiddish today? Nish gestoigen, nish gefloigen. Never happened, never will. Lo hoya v'lo osid liyos. It never happened and it never will happen. So why did the Torah write it? Droish v'kabel schar. Just so that we should learn it and get reward for learning Torah. Hashem, Rotza Kadosh Baruch Hu Lazakos says Yisrael. Hashem wanted to give the Jewish people more merits. He wanted to give them more opportunities. He wanted to give them more mitzvahs, more Torah to learn. Hashem said, here you go. I'll give you a mitzvah. It's called the Goy Batim. It never happened and it never will happen. The mitzvah, the pursuit of the mitzvah, is the learning of it is purely academic. That's it. And the Gemara goes on to explain why not, because the only way that this is possible is it has to be kishtei grisin al shtei avonim. It has to be seen on two stones, and the two stones have to be on two different walls, and they have to be touching each other. So it would only be possible if it would be a certain size, on a particular corner, in a particular area. It has too many specific specifications, and so therefore the mitzvah is impossible to be manifest literally. Can never happen. Finished. Nothing to talk about. Okay. We find this, the Gemara brings here, we find this with other mitzvahs, right? We find this with Ben Sayru Moira very famously. We find this by Irani Dachas. All right, with many of these mitzvahs, the Gemara debates, did they happen, did they not happen? Are the mitzvahs just purely academic? Are they not purely academic? The Gemara gets into it. But for now, and in fact, even with regard to this, with Negoy Batim, the Gemara has this debate as well. But definitely, this is clear, Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon, it is his opinion, that this mitzvah is purely theoretical and academic, never happened. Not just, it is a bold statement. Never happened and never will happen. Because the specifications of the mitzvah, when you study it, where the nega appears and how it appears, that the Torah gives too many specifics. It's not possible for it to actually ever happen this way. All right. Now this is a very interesting teaching. This idea that Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon says that this concept of negoi batim, of Tzaraas appearing on the walls of the home, is just purely academics. This is very interesting because of another very famous Rashi. Also, when it comes to this concept of Negoi Batim, of Tzaraas appearing on the walls of the home. This is actually the first Rashi, the very first Rashi on the mitzvah of Negoi Batim, on the mitzvah of Tzaraas on the walls. On the Possuk, Perek Yudalit, Possuk Lamadalit, V'nosati nega Tzaraas, Hashem says, I will place the affliction, the ailment of Tzaraas. Rashi seems to be perturbed by the word v'nosati. V'nosati, I will give, is usually a word that's used in a connotation of giving a gift, or giving a bracha, or giving something nice. But how do you, it's a strange expression. This, I believe, is what's bothering Rashi. It's a strange expression. How do you use the word v'nosati to express the Rabbeinu Shalom's willingness, when the Rabbeinu Shalom talks about placing Tzaraas on the walls, what is this, some kind of gift that I'm going to give you? So Rashi says very famously, Besoiro Hilohem, this was good news for the Jews. It even rhymes. It was good news for the Jews, Shanu Goyim Boim Aleim, that these afflictions, that Tzaraas, would come onto their homes. Why? Because the Jews, this Rashi is very, very famous, because the Jews were going to profit from this. They were going to make money. Lefi sheitminu amoyrim atmoinios shel zohov bekiros bateihem Kol arboim shana shehoyu Yisrael bamidbar. Says Rashi, he's quoting the Medrash. Says Rashi, you know what happened? The Goyim in Eretz Yisrael, for 40 years that the Jews were in the desert, the Goyim were hearing that the Jews are coming to Eretz Yisrael. You hear what's going on here, my friends? For 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, by the decree of Hashem, the Goyim, the Amorim, the locals who lived in Eretz Yisrael are hearing, they're anticipating that the Jews are coming. And they know that when the Jews are coming, they're going to claim their rightful ownership to the land of Eretz Yisrael as is given to them by Hashem. And they know that they're going to be driven out. And they don't want the Jews to get a hold of their money. So therefore, they took their money for 40 years and they hid them in the best possible hiding place that they could think of. Where is it? Bekiroi spotayim, in the walls of their home. So when the Jewish people eventually did come into Eretz Yisrael, and eventually did fight the wars, and did drive out their enemies, and did stake their claim, did claim their ownership rightfully to the land that Hashem had promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and given to their ancestors. In the days of Yehoshua, when they finally did this, perhaps unbeknown to the Jews, the walls of their homes were filled with wealth and treasures. But they didn't know. They didn't know perhaps which houses. They didn't know where in the home. They didn't even know about the treasures at all, perhaps. What happened? They would get Tzaraas on the walls of their home. And then, eventually, as the Torah goes on to say, they would have to knock down the walls. Because of the afflictions of Tzaraas, the homes would be knocked down. And they would find them. So this is the reason, says Rashi, why the Torah uses the word v'nosati when it comes to the Rabbeinu Shalom saying, I'm going to place Tzaraas on the walls of your home. Hashem says, this is a gift. V'nosati nega Tzaraas, I'm going to give you Tzaraas, because through this, you're going to become wealthy. You're going to discover the quote, matmoiniyos shel zohav, treasures of gold, that had been hidden in the walls of the home by the Goyim, in anticipation of the Jewish people coming there and taking over what was rightfully theirs. The Jews would find the treasures in the walls of the home, of the homes, when they had to knock down the homes because of Tzaraas. This is the first Rashi, a direct quote from the Medrash. That Rashi begins, the first thing Rashi teaches us when it comes to the concept of Negoi Batim, Tzaraas that's found on the walls of the home. Now I'm going to ask you question number one for today. Question number one, if the Gemara tells us that Tzaraas on the walls of the home never happened and never will happen, because the specifics of the mitzvah make it so difficult that it's not, it's like ben soyer u'moyer, it's like ira nidachas. The specifications are too many and too nuanced. There's no way for this to actually materialize. Then how are the Jewish people ever going to find the treasures? What's going on here? If the Goyim are hiding treasures in the walls of their home for 40 years, and the only way for the Jewish people to find them is for these houses to get knocked down, that's the only way. Otherwise, the treasures remain locked up, inaccessible to the Jews. No. So the Torah gave us a mitzvah. Hashem gives us good news and says, "V'nosati nega Tzaraas, I'll put Tzaraas on your walls. Knock down the house and find the money." Comes Reb Lozer Reb Shimon and says, you know something? Tzaraas on the walls of the home, lo hoya v'lo yosid liyos. What's the expression? Bayis hamanuga, a home with Tzaraas, lo hoya v'lo yosid liyos. It's never going to happen. No, so how do we get the money? Is this literal or is it not literal? If it's not literal, it's just drosh v'kabel schar. Then why do we need to know that the Goyim were hiding treasures in the walls of their home? We're not going to find it anyways. And if they were hiding treasures in the walls of their home, in order for us to find it through this wonderful experience of Tzaraas on the walls of our home, then why is Rabbi Lozer Reb Shimon saying it's never going to happen? How is that good news that it's never going to happen? That's horrible news. That means we'll be sitting surrounded by treasures in the walls of our own home, and we won't know about it because we're never going to knock down our home. Now you're ready for this? Hold on to your head. When Rashi quotes this medrash about the goyim hiding treasures in the walls of their home, Rashi doesn't tell us who said this in the medrash. The medrash almost always gives us the author of this teaching, the one, well, not the one who made it up, but the one who gave us this tradition. Who was it that taught us this? So you open a medrash and you take a look. Who's the one who told us that the goyim hid the gold in the walls of their home for 40 years so that the Jews could come and Hashem gave us the mitzvah of Tzaraas so we'd knock down the walls and find the treasures? You know who it was? It was Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai himself is the one who says it's a good thing for the houses to be knocked down so the Jews can find the treasures. So not just that these two teachings seem to contradict each other. One which says the mitzvah is purely academic. The other one which says the mitzvah is to make us rich with the gold hidden in the walls. Not just that they seem to contradict each other, but actually they were said by father and son. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai says, knock down the walls, discover the treasures. Rab Shimon says the whole mitzvah is purely academic. Why would father and what's the meaning of the fact that father and son buried next to each other, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai and Rab Elazar, seem to have such opposing views on the same mitzvah? One says, knock down the house, you'll find the gold, you'll get rich, it's a great bracha. The other one says, the mitzvah has too many specifics, it's purely academic, it never happened, and it never will. Okay, let's ask one more question, just one more. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wants us to know that this is fantastic news that we're going to get Tzaraas in the walls of our home. Fantastic. The goyim have been hiding treasures of gold in the walls for 40 years. You know how much you can hide in 40 years? They've been hiding stuff in the walls for 40 years. They'll knock down the houses and find all the gold. Really? What is it? Let's just think about this for a second. What is it actually that makes Tzaraas appear on the walls of a home? Which mitzvah does a person need to do in order to merit these treasures of gold hidden in the walls of the home that the goyim hid for 40? What exactly is the great zchus that a Jew has in order for Tzaraas to appear on the walls of their home and have their home knocked down? The Medrash and the Gemara tells us there are 11 sins for which a person gets Tzaraas. Lashon hara, the famous one. Anger, not so famous. Avodah zarah is one of them. You'd have to actually be a pretty miserable sinner and ignore at least 3 warnings on your home in order to actually have your home knocked down after the Kohen sees there's no other solution other than to destroy this guy's house, because he won't stop sinning. He won't stop talking Lashon hara. He won't stop getting angry. He won't stop. One of the sins the Gemara says is avodah zarah. I don't understand. So you got two Jews living in homes in Eretz Yisrael. One is a tzaddik who sits and learns Torah all day, does mitzvahs, helps Jews, davens with a minyan, everything. The other guy is a masaper Lashon hara, tells Lashon hara. A kaisen, a person who gets angry, serves avodah zarah. You know what happens? The person who learns and davens all day, his home remains intact. No Tzaraas appears. And the guy who's talking Lashon hara and worshipping idols and getting angry all the time, he's going to get his house knocked down. And he's the guy who's going to find the treasures, matmoiniyos shel zahav, treasures of gold that the goyim have hidden there for 40 years. What special zchus does Lashon hara, kas, and avodah zarah contain that because of that a Jew should merit golden treasures to be discovered in their home? What's Rab Shimon Bar Yochai? This needs to be understood. What's Rab Shimon Bar Yochai saying? We read it so many times, we may have stopped thinking even about what we're saying. What's Rab Shimon Bar Yochai saying here? That the sinners among the Jews, the ones who are actually guilty of Tzaraas appearing on their home, and the Kohen comes to check it out once, twice, 3 times, until there's no other choice other than to knock this guy's house down in a desperate effort to get him to hopefully to get him to stop sinning. He's the one who finds the treasures. Wow! How's that going to work? in terms of discouraging Jews from committing sins. Could you imagine? When everybody knows that Yankel, the Oived Avodah Zorah, the Mesaper Lashon Hora, the Kaisan, he got rich when his house was knocked down? What in heaven's name does this mean? Okay. One more medrash, my friends. Hold on to your heads. This one also from Vayikra Rabbah. Says the medrash, open your hearts. Says the medrash, there's a deeper meaning to this mitzvah of Tzaraas appearing on the walls of the home, and the home having to be first quarantined. The home having to be first everything removed from it, and then quarantined, and then pieces of it removed, and then the whole thing removed. Says the Medrash on a deeper level, this bias that we're talking about, this home with Tzaraas on it, you know which bias this is talking about? Zeh Beis HaMikdash. V'nosati negat Tzaraas b'veis eretz achuzaschem. The Torah says, Hashem says, I will place Tzaraas in the home, in the home, in the land of your inheritance. This bias, says the Medrash, is the Beis HaMikdash. And when the Possuk says that the owner of the bias, who bo asher lo yabayis, the owner of the home comes. The owner of the home is the Rebbeinu Shloim, Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when he goes to the Kohen is Yirmiyah Hanavi, referred to by the Torah as Kohen V'Navi. And the Rebbeinu Shloim comes to Yirmiyah, the Kohen. The owner of the home comes to the Kohen, the owner of the Beis HaMikdash, Hashem, comes to Yirmiyah the Kohen and says, Kenega nira li baboyis, I feel like there's Tzaraas in my Beis HaMikdash. What is he referring to? He's referring to the sin of idol worship. So the entire home has to be cleared, says the Medrash. And all of Hashem's kelim, all of Hashem's vessels are removed from the Beis HaMikdash. The mitzvah of Tzaraas in the walls of the home, it's a moshel, it's homiletical. It's meant to be understood, in addition to the mitzvah itself, of course. It's meant to be understood as a remes for the Beis HaMikdash. There's a Beis HaMikdash, a home, and the home has an owner, it's Hashem. And Hashem goes to Yirmiyah the Kohen and he says, there's Avodah Zorah in my Beis HaMikdash. So all of the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash have to be removed. And eventually, the Beis HaMikdash has to be destroyed. But the Medrash concludes, it's not forever. For even as the stones of the home where there is Tzaraas are removed, the Torah adds immediately as part of the mitzvah, V'lokchu avonim acheros, other stones were immediately taken. And the beginning of the process of the rebuilding of this home began immediately. So even, says the Medrash, as the Rebbeinu Shloim, through his Kohen, destroys the home, it's not the end, God forbid, but rather the beginning of a process of one day, please God, rebuilding this home, the home that was afflicted by Tzaraas, into what would one day, please God, be a home where there would be no more Tzaraas. And the home would live, and the home would endure forever. You see, on a deeper level, the Medrash wants us to understand that what we're talking about here, when we talk about a home with Tzaraas, we're talking not just about any regular home. We're talking about the Beis HaMikdash. And the Tzaraas represents the sins of the Jew that defile this Beis HaMikdash and cause the vessels to be removed, the home to be temporarily destroyed, until one day, please God, speedily in our days when we do tshuva, and it'll be time to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And here the commentaries point out something amazing. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai taught us that when the home is physically destroyed, there would be treasures that would be hidden inside the home that would be discovered only upon the destruction of the home. And so, since the Medrash has taught us that the destruction of the home represents Churban Beis HaMikdash, we're now challenged to understand the teaching of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, that there are treasures of gold hidden in the walls of this home that will only be discovered when the home is destroyed. Again, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is talking about Tzaraas as it appears on the walls of the Jewish homes when they come into Eretz Yisrael. But once the Medrash teaches us that the home that gets Tzaraas refers to the Beis HaMikdash, and the breaking down of this home refers to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we now are challenged to find a deeper perspective here. So if Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is saying that the destruction of the home is not a bad thing, is not inherently a bad thing, it's not just a bad thing, because when it's destroyed, it'll peel away the layers, and behind it we'll find treasures hidden there by Goyim. Now we got to think. How do we apply this to the destruction, Rachmana litzlan, of the Beis HaMikdash? How could Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, who knew this Medrash too, of course, be saying that even when the Beis HaMikdash is being destroyed in its walls, we'll find treasures that are hidden there by Goyim? What does this mean? And so the commentaries give this I find it truly, truly amazing insight. You know, they say, the Medrash tells us, that when the Goyim destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, and they entered into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, they saw the Oron HaKodesh. They saw the Kruvim. They saw the Kruvim, one on the right and one on the left, one which represented Hashem and one which represented Klal Yisrael. And the Kruvim, says the Medrash, were facing each other, and not just facing each other, but they were completely embracing each other. Completely. The Goyim who saw this, says the Medrash, were so unimpressed. They were so turned off by this. They were like, we finally penetrated the holiest place of the holiest sanctuary of the Jewish people. We finally gotten into the epicenter, the headquarters of the most concentrated Kedusha place. And there, what do we find? The image, a golden image, one male, one female, locked in an embrace. This is supposed to be a people who don't worship material idols. This is supposed to be a people who worship a God that cannot be defined by anything. And in the end, here it is, a getchke, they said, a golden idol. They were so unimpressed, so anticlimactic. They took it. The Medrash says they sent it out all over the world. They sent it to all the nations of the world in mockery. They said, take a look at the worship of this nation. Take a look at what they're worshiping. Okay, but what is really going on? Why is the Rabbeinu Shalom and the Jewish people in such a perfect embrace here? Isn't this the darkest moment of the relationship between Hashem and the Jews? And of course, we all know the explanation. The explanation is that Hashem did it bedafka. It was intentional. It was intentional that when the Goyim would go in there, they would see Hashem and the Jewish people, represented by the Kruvim, in a perfect and complete embrace. So that the Jewish people would not think for a second, chas v'shalom, even in the moment that the Beis HaMikdash is being destroyed, that the Rabbeinu Shalom had turned his divine back on them. God forbid. Hashem wanted the Jewish people to know that even in a moment like this, his love, his relationship with the Jews was as strong as ever, stronger than ever. And the Beis HaMikdash was only being destroyed for the well-being, for the well-being of the Jews, for the ultimate rebuilding of it for the sake of the Jews. The way they explain it, the way the commentaries explain, they explain it this way. The Rabbeinu Shalom was giving the Jews a message. He was telling them, sometimes we can forget. We can think that it's really about the Beis HaMikdash, the physical structure of the Beis HaMikdash. We can think it's about the kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. We can think it's about the avoid of the Beis HaMikdash. We can start to think that as long as we're doing the avoid and the physical Beis HaMikdash itself, that is sufficient. It's not, says the Rabbeinu Shalom. In the end, what is the Beis HaMikdash really? It's really a place of v'shachanti b'soicham. It's really a place where in the end, it's a physical structure that's supposed to express the unity and the relationship between Hashem and the Jews. Hashem says at the moment of Churban Beis HaMikdash, Hashem destroyed it because Hashem said, you've gotten too carried away with the physical structure. It's not about the physical structure. It's about the relationship between Hashem and the Jews that takes place inside the structure. If Jews have forgotten about their relationship with Hashem and started to focus only completely on the actual Beis HaMikdash itself, if they offer up korbanos instead of doing tshuva, if they think that somehow the rituals, the work that's done in the Beis HaMikdash can take the place of them cultivating a relationship with Hashem, Hashem says, this is not going to work. I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to allow the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed and exposed to the whole world the kruvim, the two golden images representing Hashem and the Jewish people, fully embracing each other, so that the whole world can see the true nature of the love between Hashem and the Jewish people. You know, when I was learning this, I was thinking maybe a little bit of a silly analogy, perhaps, but an analogy nonetheless. One of the love languages, one of the ways that human beings show each other love is they buy each other gifts, right? Parents and children, husbands and wives, children and parents. We buy each other gifts. It's one of the ways that human beings show each other love. Gifts, like everything else in this world that Hashem has created, gifts can be abused. The receiver of the gift can abuse the gift by taking it for granted. The giver of the gift can abuse the concept of giving gifts by giving gifts rather than investing in the relationship. Imagine a scenario, right? Imagine a scenario where a husband comes home to his wife and he's bought her a beautiful gift. I don't know, whatever it is, a piece of jewelry, a chveis, soll sein. Imagine a scenario where the woman takes the gift that her husband has just brought her, which is expensive, and she takes it and she throws it on the floor and she smashes it, destroys it. All right. The couple go for therapy. I bought you an expensive gift, you destroyed it. How ungrateful is that? I'm trying to cultivate the relationship. You're taking it, you're stepping on it, you're destroying it. What kind of a wife would do that to her husband? This is terrible, right? On the surface, absolutely, it seems terrible. But we start scratching the surface. It turns out, let's say in this particular scenario, the woman says to her husband, to tell you the truth, I don't really want your gifts. I like them, I appreciate them, they're nice. But it's not the gifts that I want, it's a relationship with you. And I feel like you keep throwing gifts at me without investing yourself in the relationship. Stop! Do me a favor, she says to her husband. Next time you come home from a business trip, or wherever it is that you go, don't bring me a gift. Instead, put away all the distractions. Sit down on the couch, look me straight in the face, in the eyes, make eye contact with me, and ask me how I am. Ask me how I feel. Talk to me. Listen to me when I respond. And connect with me as a person. Ich bin der Meuchel der alle deine Matonas. I forgive you all your gifts. I'm looking for a relationship with you. Yes, if there's a relationship, gifts will of course enhance it. Of course. We'll take it to the next level. Men, this is not an excuse not to buy your wives gifts. But it is an important understanding that the gifts don't take the place of the relationship. They can only enhance it if there is a relationship there. And if the woman feels like he keeps pushing her into the realm of gifts without paying her any attention, she starts to despise the gifts. If you take a look in the Pesukim that the Rabbanu Shalom speaks to Yirmiyah, right before Yirmiyah Hanavi, the Kohen Hanavi, before the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. He tells Yirmiyah, the Rebbe Shalom says to Yirmiyah, I've come to despise the korbanos. I've come to despise Shabbos and Yom Tov. The Rebbe Shalom says, I don't want the korbanos anymore. Now what does that mean? The Rebbe Shalom doesn't want korbanos. It was the Rebbe Shalom's idea to bring the korbanos in the first place. The pshat is exactly like the commentaries are saying over here. The moment a Jew thinks we can buy God off with a sacrifice, The moment the Jew thinks we can buy God off with some ritual that we do in the Beis HaMikdash and that's enough, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, you forgot the point. The gifts have become a distraction. It's like the Beis HaMikdash, may Hashem protect us. It's like the Beis HaMikdash has become, in that sense, a distraction. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'm looking, the Beis HaMikdash is supposed to be our home. We're supposed to live here together. Now you're worshipping idols outside the Beis HaMikdash and coming into the Beis HaMikdash and offering sacrifices? Says the Rebbeinu Shalom, Kenega nira li baboyis. My Beis HaMikdash is afflicted with Tzaraas. We have to destroy it. Says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, don't misunderstand what's going on here. When the Rebbeinu Shalom allows the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed, v'nosati nega Tzaraas, when the Beis HaMikdash allows, when the Rebbeinu Shalom allows it, this is because there are matmoiniyos shel zov, golden treasures that are hidden in the walls of the Beis HaMikdash. I saw a beautiful addition to this. They write, the Rab Shimon Bar Yochai says, the Goyim hid the treasures in the walls of the home. What does it mean? The Goyim here represents the Yetzer Hara. The Goyim represent the Yetzer Hara. The treasures represent the treasure, the real matbeya ma'alechas, the real currency here, the love between the Rebbeinu Shalom and a Yid. They've hidden it in the walls of the home, meaning it is inside the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash does serve as a marriage canopy, as a home for the Rebbeinu Shalom and the Jewish people, a place where they experience their connection for Shechanti B'Soichem. But the Yetzer Hara has managed to hide it in the walls of the Beis HaMikdash, so that you can be in the Beis HaMikdash, do the avodah, and not experience, and not really be connected. You can fulfill a mitzvah. It's possible to physically fulfill a mitzvah and not be conscious of the fact that the purpose of this mitzvah is to connect to Hashem. Hashem says we have to temporarily knock down this house and expose and show the kruvim facing each other, embracing each other, loving each other, so that the Jews will understand that the purpose of all of this in the end is for the two kruvim to embrace each other, for the Rebbeinu Shalom and a Yid to be in a perfect embrace. I saw another beautiful, there's another layer to this, another beautiful element. It says the Rebbeinu Shalom destroyed the Beis HaMikdash to arouse the Jews to do tshuva. Right? The purpose of destroying the Beis HaMikdash was to motivate the Jews to do tshuva. So the commentary is right. As soon as the Jews saw that the Beis HaMikdash was starting to get destroyed, they immediately started to do tshuva. So as soon as they started to do tshuva, so as soon as a Yid even begins to do tshuva, the Rebbeinu Shalom embraces us completely. So in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the place of the ultimate holiness, where the pnimius, where the truth is revealed, the love between Hashem and a Jew was completely on display. The Goyim didn't understand why. They didn't understand the real reason why Hashem was allowing them to go and now send this all over the world to show this to everybody. They thought they were doing it to mock the Jews. But on a deeper level, the Rebbeinu Shalom allowed this not for the Jews to be mocked, Rahman al-Islam, but for the whole world to see that even in the darkest moments in the relation, seemingly in one of the darkest moments between Hashem and the Jews, where the very home which was built for Hashem and the Jews to live there in spiritual intimacy forever, even when that structure is being destroyed, it's not chas v'shalom for the sake of destruction, but just for the Jews to be reminded, for the world to be reminded of the true pnimiistika, the true inner nature of the perfect relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. It's important that when we talk about this, we don't chas v'shalom glorify the difficult patches of Jewish history. We don't Rahman al-Islam become numb to the pain, to the suffering that went on here, and we don't appear chas v'sholom to be justifying it, because that's not our role. That's not our place. But if the Torah tells us that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and the Goyim entered the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kruvim, which represent Hashem and the Jewish people who were embracing each other in ultimate love, then the Torah wants us to know that even in a moment like this, or bedafka in a moment like this, Hashem has not turned his back on the Jewish people, and the Jewish people have not turned their backs on Hashem. Quite the contrary. This was the ultimate display and revelation of the deep, unbreakable connection between a Jew and Hashem. All right, let's keep going. Along comes Rebbe Lozer. This is on a deeper level. This is the meaning of the teaching of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Oh, before Rebbe Lozer, let's add one more part. We asked before, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said that the treasures were found in the homes of the Jews when they were broken down. So we asked, what do you mean? But they were broken down because they spoke Lashon Hara. They were broken down because they got angry. They were broken down because they worshipped idols. So what, they should find the treasures? They should find the treasures bedafka through these types of sins. On a spiritual level, the meaning of this is incredibly powerful. Think it through. You have two people who are in a bias. You have two people who are in a home. Let's call it two couples, right? See, let's go back to the same analogy. Two couples. One couple are living in a home where there is shalom bayis. There is kedusha v'tara. There is intimacy in this home. The couple are connected on the deepest of levels. When the couples feel this way about each other, their love, the uniqueness of their relationship is reflected in every part of the home. When they look around at the walls of the home, when they look around at the furniture, when they look around at every detail of their home, every aspect of it is experienced in the context of this magical relationship that Hashem has blessed them with. And when a couple, Rahman al-Itzlan, are engaged in a relationship that is riddled with strife, then every piece of furniture that's in their home becomes emotionally associated with this strife. Says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, the Jews built the Beis Hamikdash. There is this bias, the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem instructed them to build as a place where Hashem and the Jews would experience their loving relationship for all eternity. That was the intention. But at some point, the Jews forgot what the purpose of this home was. They turned it into a place of rituals, and the relationship was gone. Hashem said, tear down the home, break the gift, expose the true nature of what's really going on, or expose the relationship. If the Jews hadn't, may Hashem protect us, if the Jews hadn't forgotten what the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash was, if they would have remained loyal, if they would have learned and davened and fulfilled Hashem's will, then yes, then they would not have allowed the Goyim, they would not have allowed the Yetzer Hara to hide the treasures in the walls. Then the whole home, the whole Beis Hamikdash would be one giant treasure. They would look at the home and they would see the greatest treasure of them all, the greatest source of happiness. There's no greater source of happiness for human beings than to live in a loving, filled home. That's what the Beis Hamikdash was supposed to be. And that's what it was for a while, until the Jews got distracted with all sorts of things. Now the love, the Zohar, according to Kabbalah, represents love of Hashem. The gold gets hidden in the walls by the Goyim. Now the home is not experienced as a place of love and a place of connection with Hashem. Now it's just a home of rituals. Hashem says, tear down the home. Expose the golden treasures, expose the kruvim that are locked in matrimony and intimacy, so that the Jews can once again experience their own neshamas and their own relationship with Hashem. Let's conclude. Along comes Rebbe Lozer, Reb Shimon. Let's go back to the Gemara. Along comes Rebbe Lozer, Reb Shimon, and says, Bayis hamanuga loy hoyo v'loy osid liyos. Open your hearts, my friends. Bayis hamenuga loy hoya v'loy osid liyos. Translation. A home, an afflicted home. Bayis hamenuga. A Tzaraas afflicted home never happened and never will happen. What is he trying to say? What is he trying to say? That Tzaraas never appeared on the walls of the house? That the Jews didn't sin and spiritually afflict the Beis HaMikdash with the sin of Avodah Zarah? What he's trying to say is that any Tzaraas, any ailment, any sin, any spiritual imperfection that manages, Rahman al-Itzlan, to creep into the relationship between a Yid and Hashem, any disharmony that manages to creep into this Shalom Bayis and this relationship between God and the Jews, is superficial. In Yiddish we say, "Es ist zugeklebt." You know what zugeklebt means? It's on the outside. Bayis hamenuga, the house itself, to say that the house itself is a house of Tzaraas, that the house itself has become afflicted, chas v'sholem, lo hoya v'lo yosid liyos, never happened and never will happen. The Beis HaMikdash remains intact. The Beis HaMikdash remains pure. The neshama of a Yid is always complete. Dig deep down into the Yid. Dig deep down into the Beis HaMikdash. Over there you will find a place which is holy and which is pure and which is unaffected. If there is Tzaraas, even if we have to knock down the Beis HaMikdash to expose the true nature of the relationship between the Jew and Hashem, says Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, make no mistake. Any imperfections that were perceived were just superficial. You know, I'm saying this, of course, because in just a couple of days, we're going to celebrate the Yom Tov of Pesach. And the Yom Tov of Pesach resonates with us this year more than any other year that we've experienced in many of our lifetimes, because of the context of what's going on in the world and for the Jewish people nowadays, while we sit down at our table and celebrate Pesach. And declare ourselves free men and free women, because the Ribbono Shel Olam took us out of Mitzrayim 3,500 years ago. And you know, the commentaries tell us, a person actually, in order for them to be free, in order for a person to be a liberated person, freedom can only come from one place. It has to come from deep within myself. Because if somebody else liberates me, if somebody else grants me freedom, if I'm a slave to one person, if I'm a slave to Reuven and tomorrow Shimon comes and frees me, then all that happens is I go from being Reuven's slave to Shimon's slave. So if you're waiting for someone in your life to come and free you, then all you're really doing is waiting for another person who's going to subjugate you. A person is only free, not one moment before the person stands up and says, I'm not free because anybody decided or made me free. I'm free because the Ribbono Shel Olam made me, because I'm a child of Hashem, because I'm a Yid. When the Ribbono Shel Olam took us out of Mitzrayim, actually, the Ribbono Shel Olam didn't make us free people for the first time. The Ribbono Shel Olam exposed that we always were free people from the beginning. That means when we sit at the Pesach Seder, we have to peel away the outside layers and discover within ourselves a place which is wholesome, which was never subjugated or subservient to anything ever. No matter what we've been through, no matter what we've brushed against, no matter no matter the darkness we've seen and experienced, personally and collectively, deep down, somewhere deep inside, there's a part to us which is as fresh and as pure and as wholesome and as innocent as a newborn baby. We call this the Pintel Yid, the Neshama, and that's where the Chayrus and that's where the freedom comes from. And perhaps on a deeper level, this is the meaning of the words of Reb Elazar Reb Shimon when he says, Bayis hamenuga, the words are so powerful. You want to tell me there was Tzaraas in the Beis Hamikdash? You want to tell me Yirmiyah himself, the Torah tells us, was killed by the Jews in the Beis Hamikdash? You want to tell me the Jews descended to a spiritual abyss that was unprecedented, that the Rebbeinu Shalom himself had no choice, so to speak, but to destroy the Beis Hamikdash? Yes, said Rabbi Shimon. It's true. But it's all superficial. Tzaraas on the outside, Beis Hamikdash on the inside. And the Tzaraas can never really, ever, truly touch the Beis Hamikdash itself. Bayis hamenuga. You want to tell me there was a Beis Hamikdash that actually took on the persona of Tzaraas? No, cries Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Loy hoyo v'loy yosid liyois. Chas v'shalom. Never was, and never will be. And see an amazing thing. When you think about the relationship between Rabbi Elazar and his own father, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Chachamim saw them as so far apart from each other. The Chachamim saw one as vinegar and one as wine. The Chachamim saw one as a tzaddik and one as controversial and one as questionable. They saw them as so far apart from each other. And yet, when the time came to bury them, and even a serpent surrounding the cave wouldn't allow them in, as if to say, the serpent in my head, it represents all of the reasons, all of the issues that the Chachamim had to prevent this reunion. They turned to the serpent, the Chachamim turned to the serpent and said, no, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai has come to us in a dream and he's reassured us that Rabbi Elazar is his son. Achno, they said. Serpent. Negative forces of the world. Psach, picho. Open your mouth. Allow a son to be reunited with his father. And the serpent opened his mouth. And the Chachamim buried Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon right next to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, where he belonged. It was that moment where the pnimius, where the truth was exposed. The holiness of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the holiness of his son Rabbi Elazar, the unbreakable bond between father and son, the unbreakable bond between the Ribbono Shel Olam and every one of us who are referred to as the Ribbono Shel Olam's children, who sometimes go through all sorts of experiences, and sometimes the serpents of the world prevent our entering, and they say, no, how can you allow these two to be connected when they're so far apart? We turn to these negative forces and we say, serpent, Yetzer hara, you'll never, ever be able to truly divide between a father and son. Never happened, and never will. For the moment that true connection is exposed, the moment the Jew can get to that place within themselves, that Kodesh HaKadoshim, that place where the Kruvim are truly embracing each other, those golden treasures that despite the Goyim's efforts for 40 years remain hidden in the walls of the Beis HaMikdash, that the moment that you can get back there, nothing can separate between a child, between a Jew and their Father in heaven. Even if the sins, even if the Averis cause, necessitate the breaking down of the home, the moment the home is broken down, the truth, of course, will always be revealed. May Hashem bless us and protect us as we study this mitzvah of Negoi Batim, of Tzaraas on the walls of the home. This Shabbos, on Shabbos HaGodel, may Hashem bless us with the ultimate Shabbos HaGodel, the coming of Mashiach, where we will experience the ultimate bias, the ultimate home, the ultimate rebuilding of the home. V'nosati, the Ribbono Shel Olam, will restore the Beis HaMikdash, together with all of its hidden treasures, physical treasures, and spiritual treasures. V'yikonos b'nei tzalaviv, may every son be reunited with his father, with our Father in heaven, with the coming of our righteous Mashiach. Of course, it would be inappropriate of me not to conclude by saying that tonight, on the Chabad calendar, Friday, is a very special day. It's Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th day of Nisan, the birthday of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Who, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who, like the Rebbe, taught us to never give up on a Jew, to never give up on a bias, to always search and to always look deeper, Because if you dig deep enough, the Rebbe taught us, inside the heart and the soul of every Jew, you'll find the greatest hidden treasures of gold that have been stored there and waiting to be uncovered and revealed. Have a wonderful Shabbos.